what I wanted to share today is a little bit about what Jason just outlined, is how we approached the 2020 season, launching such a big endeavor, and really share a few slides. I'll try and speed through. I know we only have about 20 minutes here, to share the answer around how. We get that a lot. How did you adjust? How did you work on the fly to continue to operate, especially in light of the pandemic, but also especially in light of a launch year of a very big endeavor? And I think we really faced it all, but faced it head on. And thanks to the likes and talents of Pete Eminger and many others, we stand here today, I think, having a good story to tell, and I'm happy to be able to do that with all of you today. I just wish we could do it in person, but maybe at a future event. So if we click on the slides, I think Katie is driving, but one of the things that's really helpful here is, when we talked about what it will take to have the stamina required, right? The resiliency that I think people talk about a lot, it really rested on values. The next slide here, we actually had spent the better part of the initial season, prior to us launching in 2019, talking about not what are we going to go do, but how are we going to go do it? What are we going to value? So Katie, I think if you go to the next slide, it shows a lot of the work on agility, collaboration, openness, excellence, service. These are our big five. We spent months thinking about, were these the right words? We tossed around so many different concepts, and what are we going to value when the weather is good? What are we going to show up as when the weather is bad? And I'm just so glad we did this, because values work is incredibly important to me, for many different reasons, but we needed them in spades in the 2020 season year. And I think in particular, all five of them really showed out. But this notion of agility, being able to move with the times, being able to pivot when you need, no matter what's thrown at you, I think was probably the biggest one that stood out to me. And I remember on stages, I shared that lesson of agility with our ownership group well before we even launched. So again, we were sort of ready to face the launch year, thinking that was going to be the toughest putt for us to make, with these five in our back pocket. And I'm really glad that we did work before we really needed it. And then on the next slide, hopefully everybody can see the slides here, but it really then was coupled with, what is the strategy going to be? What are the strategic pillars that are going to matter most to us in this moment? A lot of this is baseline. It's probably table stakes for all of you who work in different fields, but it's also, why is this appealing? Why should we be spending any time investing as a company in this concept of a franchise league on behalf of Call of Duty? And so we talked a little bit about why would a product be appealing to whom? What are our addressable audiences? We needed to understand as well that we're not just here to entertain. We actually have to make a commercially viable product. So a lot of the what needs to be paired with a good why in terms of investment and upside, both in the short and the long term. And then the how, right? How are we going to execute in a world-class way? What would make this top quality and world-class in a way that, only Activision Blizzard could really differentiate itself in the marketplace? And a lot of the work gets into key stakeholder management. I know that that's thrown around a lot, but in particular in the role of commissioner, and just really taking something from 0 to 60 the way that we did. It's one thing to have a great deck and show, look, we believe in our what, we have a great why, and we have the right team to deliver the how. But it's constantly about the ebb and flow of managing key stakeholders and the expectations that change amongst those stakeholders. I've just outlined 10 here. There are probably 100 others I could have added, but the key ones that we're thinking about day in and day out involved our players, our fans. Obviously, with no fans, it doesn't really make much sense to do all of this. Our owners who own the 12 teams in the league have huge investment, huge bets they've placed on this vision alongside us, and they have huge expectations of what they'd like to see in return. Employees, right? You can't do it without the right people at the helm to deliver on it. Our partners, so tons of commercial partners invested. We had YouTube in it to win it with us since day one, but we have myriad sponsor partners, both endemic and new to the space, that we have to manage across the board as a business. Our studios who make the game team who actually markets the game of Call of Duty has huge expectations and tie-ins to what we were doing. And then certainly, obviously, media and PR, all of the talent that we manage who shows up on game day and beyond, and our shareholders, right? And so those are at minimum the big 10 that I'd say we're constantly pushing us into new territory. And it's always a balancing act around, how do you create a great product, a great business model, and deliver it in a world-class way, but ensure that you're doing it through the lens of these key stakeholders. So we did all of that work. And then on the next slide, we were ready to launch. What I'd show here is the visual around London. This was what we thought we were going to be pressured to deliver on at first. This was pre-COVID. This is a picture of us, from amongst the fans in and around the arena. It was a tremendous event. All four that we enjoyed at the first half of the season really were stellar live production competitive entertainment experiences. And you can see the passion that Call of Duty League fans have all over the world, huge presence in and around the UK. And these are fans who are giving, upwards of 5, 6, sometimes even 10 hours of their day to see the best of the best play on a main stage. And it was really tremendous. It was exceedingly difficult. There were so many different little fires to put out everywhere from behind the scenes, but we were prepared for that. And we thought that that's really what we were going to be focused on throughout the better part of the first season and measure our success accordingly. But what happened is that, this is my best attempt at the next slide, is that in March, that it really just changed completely. You can see that, COVID changed our expectation entirely of what a live event even meant. It almost felt like overnight, and I know everybody in the sports and production world feels this in many different ways, but it just started to sort of slip away from us, right, in that moment where immediately we thought, wow, we built a product that was inherently based on live event experiences, live broadcasted experiences, and full arenas with cheering fans. What happens in a moment where really that's not the viable product model or the business model anymore? And what we had to do was really go back to the drawing board. And so a lot of people ask, well, what does agility look like? What happened post-March? So I'll share a little bit in the next few slides just of what we started to pivot into, but really staying firm and steady, I think, not only in the values that we needed in that moment. We needed to, again, move with the times. You don't fold, you just respond and react in new ways. And also, what that actually looked like tactically, because I think sometimes we don't share as much about the specifics. And so you can see on this slide here, there were post-COVID adjustments that I would say I would bucket into 3 primary areas where, we called our timeout internally, but we knew that, we needed to find a new way to still deliver the same product experience, the same business upside and viability, and the same world-class execution, even if the playbook had to be completely rewritten overnight. The first one on the left here was scheduling. There was a lot of principles and strategies that we deployed to say, how in a post-COVID world can we keep a schedule that's as close to parity as the original schedule that fans and players were expecting? And we were able to do that. And I think there were certain pivots, but for the most part, to a fan and even to a team, we didn't really disrupt the competitive experience. We still wanted to light up CDL Sundays, and we really were thoughtful about home series and how different teams could really activate their moments, even without a live arena-based event to execute. We optimized the broadcast windows. We took a lot of analysis in mind, and actually there were some silver linings in being able to not be beholden to venue-specific ticketed events. We could stretch some of the broadcast time slotting. We could think about different ways to extend the weekend, if you will, because remote broadcast and competition experiences allowed for us to be a little bit more savvy around our when. The competitive integrity precautions are obvious, but they are myriad. There could be a book written just about how do you make sure that fairness and integrity are upheld when you don't have one main stage. But I think there was a lot we did to ship out new equipment, have different rules and adjustments to our rules for coaches, for GMs, for how team communications can happen before, during, and after a match. So there was a lot more around how do we maintain fairness and balance so that fans and players truly believe that when they're competing, this is a legitimate experience for them. We had a 12-team playoff. It originally was going to be just 8, but we figured, there was a lot of lost equity in having to get that rug pulled out from under us. And so we switched to a format for the postseason where every team was going to be able to viably pursue the championship trophy. And I think fans were really happy knowing that there was a reason to continue to tune in, because at any given moment, their favorite team might take it all. And we aligned with major Call of Duty beats. We thought, around what else can we do to drive more content, more synergy, and I'll talk more about that for Champs in a bit here. The activations, we did broadcast sponsor integrations. We leveled that up, again, thanks much in part to Pete and his team, who are at the helm of finding new ways to cut up the broadcast, cut up the content. We brought in Warzone content with things like Warzone weekends. We started to do dedicated broadcasts around our Challengers Path to Pro systems, which was something, again, in a live arena-based execution was not actually in play. So that was an added bonus to some degree in us being able to think differently about our broadcasted content. And we really started to introduce co-streaming, leaning into the influencer, leaning into the analytics of winning as a YouTube-driven primary experience versus trying to win in both spaces on the live and the digital content side. So we really just focused there and tripled down, frankly, on winning on content. And then on the vendor side, right, more remote broadcast and competition tools. All of you know that better than I do. But, server improvements, how do we make sure that, again, there's different latency concerns we have to balance depending on the match, depending where all of our players are situated in and around the continent. But we were able to really spin that up with our studio teams, our IT and security enhancement teams. And then I'll talk more. We really tried to level up the visual experience of a digital broadcast, virtual stadium assets and graphics, new ways to think about digital staging and in-game integrations. And so that's just, an example. I would go to the next few slides here, which really then get specific around, okay, well, what is that all really mature into in order for us to end with a bang? And glory isn't given was really the tagline around our championship weekend. We spent so much time taking the learnings from the pivots in March to really start to grow into a mature digital-first product. You see here, we hit 1 million subscribers. We had started with under 600,000 several months before that at the launch of the season, and the scale goes back to us really focusing on winning on content and really starting to become a content-first machine. And so that was a huge milestone for Call of Duty League, and it allowed us to also convert more of those subscribers into live viewers. On the next slide, we also really thought about how we do our graphics and how we take on an MTX experience for our players to come through in the game, for our fans to be able to purchase Champs related packs that speak to the graphic nature of Championship Weekend. And so this also launched several weeks prior to the big event. This was, if you're a gamer inside the Call of Duty Modern Warfare experience, you were all of a sudden really feeling Champs promotion in a way that could be specific to you. We had player signature content as in-game items for the very first time in history. Again, really just leveling up how we could eventize in and around the game and make that meaningful with the Champs pack. So that was quite successful with the community. And then even on the graphic side, on the next slide, glory isn't given. You can start to see how that started to transition into really bold graphics. On the bottom left here is a picture of Captain Price. He is, for those of you who don't know, one of the foremost characters in the Modern Warfare catalog and canon, and he has quite the legacy as a character in the game. We were able to bring Captain Price's equity and personality into some of the promotional assets to drive, again, that synergy back to the game experience and really level up, not just having a random, actor do a VO for a Champs promotion, but really make it feel like this was thought through from an in-game first, digital first experience. So that was really cool to see. And then some of it on the next slide was just luck. I mean, we had one of the greatest all-time matches in our postseason. It actually capped off the first part of our postseason run. This was between Optic Gaming LA and the Chicago Huntsmen. Again, in layman's terms, think of the Chicago Huntsmen as like the Dallas Cowboys of the ecosystem, and then a ton of legacy, a ton of old school rivalry with the Optic Gaming LA brand at the time. This ended up being one of the most entertaining and exciting games that we've ever seen in the history of Call of Duty esports. And to be able to really stretch our playoff run to end on that bang right before the subsequent weekend for championship weekend really just, I think, started to create word of mouth around, wow, this thing isn't just operating well, it's tremendously exciting as a fan. And that created, I think, even more of a groundswell of interest as we headed into the next weekend for champs. On the next few slides, you'll just see some of the things we did to partner around fashion collaborations. We got a huge partnership off the ground at that time with Billionaire Boys Club, Pharrell's very well-known, almost cult classic type of apparel line. And this was the first partnership that the BBC was ever doing with an esports program. We also did what you see here, other collaborations around bags with Private Label NYC. And we did many, many more. And we thought about design and fashion, things that, again, aren't bound to a live stadium experience, but can still drive affinity, drive interest. We also redesigned our hardware. So on the next couple of slides, you'll see how we took a big swing at the look and feel of the trophy. This was a new league. We had a lot of legacy we were building on, but this was a huge accomplishment, and interestingly enough, became its own marketing beat for us, just because the design was so well received from existing fans of Call of Duty esports and new fans who really understood, we're putting a new look and feel on the map. And it was born out of a new logo. It's inspired by the CDL's logo, for those of you who are familiar with it. It's articulated, so it actually is sort of a puzzle piece. Top half can be removed from the bottom half. A lot of thought went into this design, and I think it, again, elevated the excitement around the event, totally independent from any ticket sale we would have done. We also, on the next slide, refurbished a new design for championship rings. Our players who win the championships have always, historically, even well before CDL was born as a franchise league, have always brought home rings as their, fanfare for having won the big moment. So we redid it. Black is really a huge theme in our look and feel and our brand design. So we went all black. We invested in, real black diamonds. Again, really being thoughtful about where can we win despite being in a post-COVID world, and got, again, a ton of fanfare and chatter going on, and created even more aspiration, I'd argue, amongst our players, even though they were not able to come together live on a main stage as we all would have preferred to be able to do. Next slide, same, we extended to try to do new things that hadn't been part of the legacy of Call of Duty esports before. We issued out a new throne. So the winner of the championship was going to get literally something shipped to them. The Dallas Empire will be experiencing that here in a couple of weeks, where they have a team facility and they can now put the championship throne there for all to see. We did a huge collaboration with one of Kanye West's former art directors to do bespoke Jordans for the winning 5 players. And, again, just really stretching into culture, trying to do new things, trying to get more attention and grab it. And I think it was very successful in that regard. The next two, images here on the following slide is really the PR. We just started to storytell, create human interest stories, find new outlets, really get out of just an endemic core audience and create more mainstream affinity and familiarity with our players. So there's a lot of great coverage. On the next slide, we also wanted to be true to our core communities who are very podcast heavy and very motivated by hearing from influencers in the community. So we did a podcast with one of our owners, in Hector Rodriguez. He had everyone kind of come in and do a champ special. Again, really, I think, appealing to the existing fans we needed to retain and create hype around through the mediums and through the voices and influencers that they want to hear from. And then the next slide was, again, just, how do you draw incentives? How do you reward the behavior that you want to see? So we started to do earn while you enjoy types of drops, very specific weapon blueprints or 3D and 2D types of MTX items that you could only earn through watching. And I think that was a great hook and something that continued to level up the anticipation of why we wanted to see people lean in and draw them to the well, so to speak. The next slide here was going back to that notion of visual staging. We started to think about, we've got an awesome stadium. It's called Verdansk Stadium in Warzone, for those of you who play any free-to-play Call of Duty VR. Warzone was a huge smash hit. It continues to just dominate in the field since launching in March. And so we took the graphics and made it as though there was sort of a bunker type of feel when you were dropping in as a viewer to championship weekend, to make it look as though we can't be in a real stadium for champs, but we can be in Verdansk Stadium for champs. And there were so many cool billboards, graphics, other visualizations that we did to be able to connect it into now a virtual stadium experience that I think felt quite special and bespoke to the IP. And then just, 2 more slides on tactics here. The next one shows a random image that wouldn't mean anything to anyone if you hadn't tuned in, but we worked with the the franchise team, to really think about this big moment around what was to come next. And what was to come next for the Call of Duty franchise was the launch of Black Ops Cold War, which obviously had a huge launch a couple days ago here. But they were starting to seed that as early as Champs Weekend. And so we worked with the franchise team to come up with a way in which we could hack the championship broadcast on CDL Sunday. This is an image of that hack, where if you were watching, you would see this, dark hooded person talking about where to go to find new codes to get access to beta keys to unlock early beta access for Cold War. Really thoughtful, really seamless, not easy to do in a seamless way, but the broadcast team and the game teams did a tremendous job pulling that through. And again, made it a reason to tune in, made it a reason to watch that was inherently unique, exclusive, and rewarding for our fans of Call of Duty as a franchise. And then lastly, as I mentioned, co-streaming. We partnered with some of the biggest co-streamers in the business, and they all sort of took their own spin on, being able to stream with their POV, their voiceovers as they were watching Call of Duty League Champs Weekend alongside our hero stream on the CDL YouTube channel. Enormous reach and extension of our audience, from Vicstar to Courage. These are formidable players in the space, and it really added in a meaningful way to what ended up being a very successful event. And so just here on the last slide, those are just some of the tactics that added up to the most watched Call of Duty esports event in history. And to be able to do that in the time frame that we needed to do it, but with the creative agility that I think we had to display was really special and felt by all. And so I just figured I'd sort of share a little bit of those tactics and the reason behind it. Again, that's all I really was here to share today. Hopefully that's insightful and helpful. It took an enormous village of people and brilliant minds all over the world to pull it off. And I just would say that, staying agile, staying collaborative, staying open to new ways of thinking really did result in quite an excellent execution, and something we're going to learn a lot from in the coming years here. So thank you.
Esports has always been focused on delivering exciting live events, which is exactly what SOS Global has done for over 30 years. Our team is 24/7, 365, with clients ranging from the Olympic Games to Twitch's annual conference. There isn't anything production-wise that we can't or haven't moved anywhere in the world, and more importantly, on time and on budget. SOS Global is a partner who can make your life easier. We get the production industry, and we've already been where you want to go. So let's work together.